TK,
Yo.
when was the moment that you realized you were not going to make it as a pro athlete?
I don't know if I realized it yet.
I knew you were going to say that.
Hey, all I can think about is Michael Jordan's Hall of Fame speech where he says, and who knows, one day I might come back at age 60. And everybody laughs. He says, don't laugh. Don't laugh. He says, because he says, fears are often just an illusion.
Look, I saw this comedy bit recently. My buddy Tim Shermack said it to me. I don't even remember who it was, but he was like, he was making the case that what's nice about being a white guy is that you don't have the luxury of maintaining that delusion. Cause like once you hit a certain age and you realize that you are white, you just immediately know you're never going to make it in pro sports. He was like, he's like, you have like a few options. You're like, maybe I could just like set picks and pass really well. But for me, okay, there's a 2-part answer.
By the way, we got to come back to Shermax because I don't know if that's true anymore. Like white guys, like
well,
in
so
NBA,
this was the other half of the stand-up bit. I got to remember who it was because it's actually really funny. He's like, that's the reason all the white guys in the NBA are from other countries because they didn't grow up around black guys. So when you're white in America, by age 12, you're at the playground and there's some kid who's dunking and you're like, well, I can't do that. So I guess I'm done. Like this is my ceiling. I can't compete with these guys. But if you grow up in Europe, you don't experience that. So these guys come over and they don't know any better. They're like, yeah, I can hang, I can do whatever. And he's like, they're all cocky and full of swagger. And like, it works because they didn't have their dreams destroyed when they were 12 years old. So
I guess so, because Jokic ain't scared of nobody.
It's true. It's true. Yeah.
Luka gets traded for AD and everybody act like he got traded for a scrub.
Dude. Well, there's also the very real phenomena that black dudes dramatically overestimate the ability of any white guy who can kind of play. That's also true. Come on. How many times have you tried to talk about some random white guy who's totally mediocre, like he's the next best, like he's an all-star?
I don't think the professor from AM1 is mediocre.
The number of times the Bulls have gotten some guy whose last name ends in itch, and you're like, oh, we're going now. We got Vuvicic.
I take none of it back. I take none of it back. If it wasn't for the Lonzo Ball injury, we'd be champions right now. So,
and if it wasn't for that Derrick Rose injury, you'd be on a 20-peat by now.
I can't refute misfortune.
Truly, though, I have this 2-part answer to that question. Part one is like, for basketball, it was probably around age 10, 11, 12, where it was like, okay, I just get it. My like athletic ceiling is so much lower. There's just no way. Baseball took a little longer. For baseball, it was delayed because I remember it was like a year or two after I had quit playing baseball. So I was like maybe 13. I was maybe 14. Played till I was like 12 or 13. And I was pretty good at baseball. Yeah. And I was always like, yeah, I probably could have like gone on further. And like, I probably could have played at like a junior college was probably my actual ceiling. But I had this belief that like, I probably could have gone, like I might've been able to make it to the minors, maybe the majors. But then I saw TJ Duckett, who played Little League Baseball with me. He was 2 years ahead of me. I was 10, he was 12. We're in the same league. This dude was like completely a different species than everyone else who played. It was just literally every at bat was a home run. Like he didn't even have to try. Like if he pitched, you just hoped that he hit you so that you could at least get to first base because you weren't going to hit him, like hit his pitches. He went on to, he was like a phenom in high school in every sport. He set state records for like discus, javelin, track and field. He was the quarterback of the football team. He was a basketball star. I had a friend who played football with him there. He could bench like 500 pounds in high school, like out of control. Plays college football, makes it to the NFL, and is like barely stay like is like a mediocre fullback in the NFL that like occasionally plays. And that's what I'm like, oh, this is like the most physically freakish guy I've ever encountered firsthand and played a sport with. And he like kind of had like a little bit of a short career where he played a little bit in a pro league. You know what I mean?
Dude, like that's how it was for us growing up. We used to go play ball at the playground in Maywood, and there was this guy named Kenny Williams who was a star at UIC. And every once in a while, you just never knew when Kenny Williams would show up to the court. And he was about like 6 feet, 6'1", and just out there flying. Like, looks like this guy's defying gravity, mid-air poses and switches, dunking on everybody, like humiliating everybody and making everybody question whether or not they wanted to play basketball again. And I don't know if Kenny Williams went to the league, but if he did, it wasn't like, an NBA starter or an NBA all-star or anything like that. But you just realize how stiff that competition really is at the higher level when you get all of the TJ Duckets and Kenny Williamses together to compete with one another. It's crazy.
Here's despite that, and despite like even playing like some, over 40 church league basketball with some guy who like 20 years ago played in a D2 college and he's just like better than everybody else. And despite that experience, I still have a little part of me that maintains the delusion that I could still to this day play at a pro. Here's how I know that that's still lurking there, because my 7-year-old son has not yet realized that I am not a pro level athlete. So, to him, like, I make every shot in basketball compared to him, and I throw the baseball so hard. He can't even catch it if I throw it as hard as I can. It's like too hard for him. And like, so to him, we'll watch sports and he'll be like, Dad, I'll be like, oh, they need to trade this guy. He'll be like, you should join the team. And the fact that I have a little bit of conflict and pain when he says that, instead of just thinking it's ridiculous or just thinking it's adorable, that there's a little part of me that's like, like maybe I could. Like, there's still this tiny part of me that's like, I should try that.
Hey, so how are you going to do this, man? Are you going to break it to him, or are you going to let him discover it?
Well, I will say, oh no, I'm not good enough to play there, buddy. And he'll be like, yeah, you are. Like, you're super good. And I'm like, well, I am super good, but no, I'll just kind of like casually, because if I try to hit him with the like, listen, son, I would literally be dead in 5 minutes. And like, it is like a physical impossible. I feel like that would send the signal to him that, because he gets frustrated that I'm so much better than he is at sports, and he gets mad that he can't play as well as a grown man.
Yeah.
And then if he knew that like, I don't even stand a chance at the college level, let alone pro, I'm like, I don't want to like overboard, but I'll just say, no, I'm not good enough to play pro. And he's like, kind of like, I think part of him thinks, yeah, you could. I know you could. I've seen you play, Dad. So
it's like if your kid's struggling to learn how to read and you come home telling them, yo, I'm going out there in the world every day, almost getting killed, son. It's like, ease up a little bit. Give them time to discover those harsh realities.
So you don't remember having a moment where like, because I know you practiced all the time, you had these dreams. Did you have a moment where you're like, sports isn't going to be the thing for me? Or did it just gradually fade?
Oh yeah, I thought you knew this.
Or are you still in the gym right now working on that jump shot?
I'm actually in the lab developing a metaphysical theory that integrates my love for basketball with C.S. Lewis's concept of the hope for heaven to figure out a way that I can achieve this in the afterlife.
It's kind of like what you told me about humor, how you got your nickname Doc when you were a kid, that other kids would tell a joke and everyone would laugh and that would be the end of it. But you would ponder and study what it is that made people laugh, the meaning of the joke. You didn't necessarily make them laugh yourself, but you understood. It's like that with sports, right? Like, listen, I may not be out there with Kobe, but I will tell you, I know better than he does what is actually happening in a metaphysical sense.
Hey, look, this is our motivation for sainthood, right? Because in the is it the I forget. I forget which book it was in the space trilogy, but there's the lady that in heaven where everyone's just praising her, and he says, "Who is that lady?" And she was just like, "Oh, she was just some ordinary woman on earth who was faithful to God. She was a total nobody, right?"
Yep.
And so maybe like in heaven, you and I will be KD and Book. You know what I mean?
Hey, that's what I'm gonna start going to the playground and being like, yeah, you think you're tough now. In heaven, I'm gonna be the baller, you know?
Right. So take that humility on the court.
Yeah, I interrupted you when you were answering, and maybe you have told me before, but when you like realized pro sports wasn't your path.
Oh yeah. So I tried out inspired by Michael Jordan being cut from his high school team for my high school team all 4 years. And I got cut every year, right? And after that last year, I thought, okay, it could be over, but there was the YMCA team. And that was kind of like the last hurrah, you know. Maybe I'll go play for the Y team, which is really competitive, and I can work on my chops there, and somehow maybe you walk on, defy all odds, and play college ball. I'm still as delusional at this stage, and so I try out for the YMCA team, and you know, everybody knew at that time that I was, you know, in theater and stuff like that too. And so one day, the guy who was the coach, he told me, TK. I said, yeah. He said, stick to acting. And usually when people say stuff like that to me, there's that rebellious Jordan-esque quality, or you want to prove them wrong. But it's like when he said it, I just knew it was true. I knew that I had to let it. I'm not going to the NBA.
Oh man. So there's an interesting segue. There's two different directions we could go, because one topic that I don't know, this is more just like a small little observance, but I want to get your thoughts on it. Because we were talking about kids. I guess we'll start here. There is a certain way that like it's easier to see in kids, but I'm sure this is true with all humans. Like there's certain types of genius that don't make any sense to me, and I have a hard time explaining. So, you know, kids can be totally ridiculously wrong or misunderstanding plenty of things. Like the example of my son, his inability to assess the relative skill of people in sport. And like to him, it's like, oh, I'm basically right up there with Luka Doncic, you know? Okay. So that's like, yeah, that shows like a level of a lack of understanding, which will change as he grows. That's super, super like low level, like extreme, right? Like, come on, that's very obvious. Like only a kid could be that stupid, right? But then there's these certain ways in which kids have this genius. And I was thinking about this the other day because my 15-year-old daughter is just incredible at irritating people on purpose. And especially, so she and my 7-year-old son, it's like, she just like reads his mind. She just knows certain things that have no rational reason for making him so angry. Like he'll go from totally fine to like mega rage level anger with something like that. Like I was literally observed this one time. We were just walking outside and she's walking and she walks like right next to him. And I don't think she knew that anyone else could hear. And she literally just like kind of leaned and said, "You're literally my best friend." And he just lost it. He was so mad. He was so angry, like, "Stop it." And she had that look on her face. Like she knew exactly what, and it's like, how does she know that her saying that she's his best friend or that they're best friends would like enrage him? So like, what is this genius? And I know your brother has that. I know that. I know you grew up with an older brother who had this genius of like, something that there's no reason on its face and adults can't understand it usually. Like, why would that make you so mad? I want to hear your take on that particular type of genius.
Well, I think every form of genius has a variety of different directions in which it can manifest, right? And there, you know, genius can be manifested in a way that makes you laugh, in a way that makes you inspired, in a way that makes you irritated, in a way that makes you relax. And when you have an intuitive grasp for where people are, when you can connect with on a visceral level the interior life of a person, so much so that you know how to push their buttons, pull their strings, get them to reframe the way they see something. That's a really powerful gift that can be used to both troll people, but also to counsel them and to comfort them. It's the same gift, right? You have to have a sense for where people are. And that same daughter you talked about, one observation that I noticed is very early on was her tendency to gravitate towards the person who might need some attention. Like if there are 10 people in a room and there's one person in the room that's kind of sad, but they're not saying it, they're not wearing it on their sleeve in an outward way, she would pick up on it, right? Now, she wasn't trolling them, but it's the same skill, just a different response to that skill. Like, oh, I can see that my brother is taking himself too seriously right now, right? And so I'm gonna like ruffle his feathers so that he has to confront that, or I'm gonna ruffle his feathers and just have a little fun with it. Because sometimes when people take themselves too seriously, it is, you know, very fun to do that sort of thing. But either way, it's the same deal.
Nothing could be more offensive to a 7-year-old boy than anyone possibly considering that he might be best friends with a 15-year-old girl. Like, even though like everyone knows she's trolling him, he can't even stand that it would be uttered. It's like so offensive to him. And somehow she just finds these things. I think it's like this, and it's not something, if you asked a typical kid who's bothering their sibling with some random thing, if you ask them, how did you know that that would bother them? I don't think they could tell you. They couldn't articulate it most of the time, but they have this genius from like the proximity to their siblings in day-to-day life that they see these patterns and they know that just like doing or saying this thing over here, they like instinctively know how that would connect to some, because like being self-serious, it's not like anything she said to him would have made him mad, or just being appreciated. I think you froze for a minute. I just went on a monologue. I'm assuming it will record it.
I hope so. You froze. Am I good now?
You're good.
You know, yeah, like the display of genius and the philosophizing about it is always interesting to me. And you see it in sports all the time with commentary, right? It's like, no, what Steph was thinking there is I've got a guy coming from the perimeter, and I know Dre is going to be able to get that rebound if I miss. So I'm going to pull up here. I've got 7 seconds on the clock. And it's like, nah, he's not thinking any of that. Or he's thinking that with his body. He's intuiting that. He's viscerally sensing that. But that doesn't mean that he would give that philosophical explanation. And if you said it to him in that way, he might even laugh at you and think that's a very overly analytical approach to what he's doing out there. You know, you see that that's one of the funnier things about the world of self-help and self-improvement, particularly when it's oriented around studying people who are successful and then distilling life wisdom from that versus, you know, just kind of like talking about what you know from your own experience. Because so many times the people who go out there and do things, if they read these books theorizing about the methodologies they were employing, they would just laugh. Yeah, there's some stuff to be learned there, but it's just two different things. And sometimes the best doers don't make very good teachers at all. I don't know. I mean, Michael Jordan himself admitted that he wouldn't make a very good coach because he just doesn't have the patience with people who don't want to be great. He doesn't understand that kind of person. And to be a good coach, you do have to understand that.
So this actually might tie in nicely to something else that I wanted to talk about, but there's this tendency to rewrite the past based on assumptions of the present. And to assume, you know, it's like after you've succeeded, you look back on your life and you tell a story about what happened that might be different than what actually happened, or others might about you. I was recently talking to a young person who just sort of, I guess, just sort of assumed that all of the decisions I've made in my life have been like, I sat down, I chose the pros and cons, and I made the decision. And it was essentially like they were all the right decisions, that I've kind of just been like going like this, and I have like really good reasons. And so we're talking about how I've moved a lot of times, and in the last few years, especially moved from Charleston to Tennessee, moved from Tennessee to Florida. And she was like, yeah, and that was like really so good for your kids to have this experience of moving and being here and being there. And I was like, No, I don't think so. Like, I think it was probably a mistake. He was like, really?
You said that.
And she kind of just assumed that like I was going to tell this story about, yeah, this is like, because, and at times in my life, I've been tempted to do that, to like rewrite my own story in order to make it feel like, yeah, everything was leading to this moment. And there's a type of doing that I think can be productive, where you're like, every thread in my life, to look back and to see the common threads and to see that there really was a plan and a purpose, and that things work together for some good. But there's also such a danger of being like, oh, I ended up here. Here's not bad. I like here. Therefore, everything that got me here was also good and correct. And like, I escaped danger on all sides. I almost took that job that would have ruined me, but I didn't. And you're like, well, how come all the decisions you almost made were wrong and everyone that you did made was right? Like, wasn't there anything, right? So I think this relationship between the present and the past, because the past doesn't exist in a sense, right? Like it's just what we say about it, the stories we tell about it. And there's a really interesting relationship there that you can kind of rewrite it in certain ways. So I thought this would be a great jumping off point to talk about Scottie Pippen.
Hey, real quick, is your screen, does it have a side by side?
Yeah, it's side by side.
It's always been clear to me how to do that, but not now.
Click the little 3 dots and then click change layout. And it should be good.
All I can do is I could click on you and I could say, don't watch.
Well, why would you do that?
I know, right? All right, there we go. Yeah.
Okay.
Think, wait.
This is what happens when you have too many different platforms to switch between.
Which one did you pick? I got auto, tilted, spotlight, sidebar.
So just do tiled.
Tiled, not tilted.
Yeah, try that. Does that work?
None changed. It's all good though.
It didn't work?
No.
Oh my gosh. I don't know what's going on.
So yeah, this would be a good time to talk about Scottie Pippen. Yeah, so I didn't watch the whole interview, but I saw him on Patrick Bet David. And I've heard, Scottie say some things about Michael Jordan in the past, but it was the most shocking when he's on that podcast. And I've watched a couple of clips because PBD is like, so how many times did you and Michael Jordan like have coffee or lunch, when you're in Chicago? And Scottie holds up his hands like 0. And he's literally talking about his past with Michael Jordan, like they never golfed together. They never went to a restaurant together, never had a drink, never had coffee. And I have no problem with someone saying, just because I worked at a job, that I still keep in touch with those people. No problem with someone saying, just because I worked really closely with that person, we weren't best friends. But I did not believe him at all. I even got no problem with him saying, we used to be close, but I don't like him anymore. I can believe that. But he sounded like this dude was lying about the past because he's so upset. And I think the reason why came out because in that interview, PBD asked him if he watched The Last Dance. And he says, not really, he didn't finish it. And he says his children were getting really disturbed by it and it was bothering them. And so, it was just too much for him to watch. And it looks like, in my understanding, that Scottie felt good about his career, as he should. But then when The Last Dance came out, it took that whole era, moved it to the forefront of people's consciousness, and changed the contemporary discussion that we're having. Everyone looked at him as the greatest sidekick of all time, top 50 of all time. And now it's like, oh, we're all talking about how you're the dude that, got the headache against Detroit. You're the dude that sat out and, pouted when the coach didn't pick you to shoot the last shot. And it looks like a lot of retroactive resentment about the way the story was told. And he holds Michael responsible for that because Jordan had the production control over what gets aired. But anyway, it's an interesting thing because Scottie's saying things now where it's not just about his relationship to Jordan, where he sounds bitter about that, but he's also saying things like, he was the greatest player, that he didn't get enough credit, that he's better than LeBron. And
that last one is true. 100%.
And he just kind of made me start thinking about this idea of reinventing the past, recontextualizing the past. And my question was, if a guy looks back on his past and he's not proud of his choices or his achievements or, his failures, he finds them embarrassing. Do you think it's impossible for him to in any way reinvent his legacy or make it more of like what he wants it to be?
Yeah. And in his case, I have a hard time knowing if he doesn't like his choices or the facts of his past, or if he just doesn't like the narrative that people have about it or the perception. Or do you think maybe it's a little bit of both? Because maybe there's a little bit of torment there, because there is this like, hey, that's not fair, I'm being presented unfairly. But there's also this little bit of, and you saw this when he was his interview part on The Last Dance, he also has a little bit of pain and maybe regret about the headache game and about some of the, like, being mad that he, taking the last, not mad that he couldn't take the last shot, taking himself out. So like, I think there's maybe a mix of like, hey, I'm being portrayed unfairly. I don't like the way that I'm being presented, but then a little bit of him also doesn't like the way that he acted in that moment. So he has like a little conflict going on. Did you pick up on that?
Yeah. And he said so much, like, I think even his decision when he left the Bulls to go to Houston and join Charles Barkley, I think he said Jordan told him, don't do that. That would be a bad move. And he just went along with it and ended up not really fitting in with their system, not being used. They just basically told him to go to the baseline and we want you to shoot threes. And it wasn't a good fit for him. Clearly with the contract stuff, Chicago Bulls still have a bad reputation because of the money issues they have with Scottie. Same thing with Jordan, but like at the end, they really gave Jordan a huge contract, and Jordan just had so many other sources of money. It just didn't matter as much. But Scottie never really got the payday. And when he started, I think he said yes early on to the contract that looked good to him. But when he emerged in the way that he did, and he started seeing all these other guys around the league who just aren't as good as him, aren't achieving that, and they're just making way more money than him. And the Bulls are pretty much like, no, your contract's your contract. We're not renegotiating. I think that a lot of bad blood. So yeah, I think it's a combination of resentment with the way people are telling his story, but also some regret about the choices he made.
Whenever you notice someone having that tension where they're not comfortable themselves with the story and the past and their choices, but they're trying to say that they are, it just makes it worse. It's very similar to Isaiah Thomas to me, when you watch the great Bad Boys 30 for 30 documentary, and then you watch even the way that, Jordan, the Bulls talk about it, when the Pistons refused to shake hands after they finally got beat. Everybody else on that team, you listen to Bill Laimbeer, he's like, hell no, we weren't going to shake their hands. And he just owns it. He's like, yeah, he feels totally at peace with that decision. Isaiah Thomas is like, well, this was how the Celtics didn't shake our hands. And like, he's trying to justify it. He's like, I'm being treated unfairly, but you can tell that he regrets. Like, if it were up to him, he probably would have done it. He just doesn't own it. He's not comfortable one way or the other. Right. Like, and he wants to change that legacy, and he's holding on to it. And he has all this bitterness. He's mad that he was left off of the Olympic team. And so he'll take these pot shots sometimes, but then he'll like reel them back in, or he'll like throw newer players under the bus and say that they're not as good as people say they are. But then he'll like try to be classy at the same time. So I think when it comes to legacy, I think both of those, and Scottie way more explicitly than Isaiah, their attempts to directly rewrite your past, rewrite your story, and tell people, no, you have it wrong, let me tell you how it goes. And I think that's impossible. I think that only makes it worse.
Yeah.
But there is a way to rewrite your legacy. Mm-hmm. And it is not by looking back and talking about what you had done in the past and trying to frame it in a different light. It's only by doing new things in the future. And I can think of a couple great examples of this. Tom Brady, Barry Sanders. Barry Sanders, most amazing running back of all time in my book, retired under weird circumstances, like early. He was still in his prime, could have broken some records, maybe. And it's like he just leaves, kind of Detroit fans felt a little betrayed by that. He's the only exciting thing we've ever had going, whatever. And so we always had this weird legacy, like probably the best ever, maybe, but like also he retired early and he's a weird guy. And like he kind of left Detroit in a lurch and there's this weird baggage. He has a documentary years later. He's a very quiet guy called Bye Bye Barry. And it just walks through the whole thing and how like it ended in kind of a sad way. And like, he just knew it was time to be done, but he knew it was like sad he was leaving behind. He just sort of owns it. And since then, now the Lions are good again the last few years. He has been the most hyped up Lions fan I have ever seen. He's at every major game. He's at all these events. He's on the sideline. He's cheering. He's constantly saying, I hope that Jahmyr Gibbs, the new running back, I hope he breaks my record. Like, oh, this Lions team, I'm so proud of them. He's not talking about himself at all. He's not talking about his past legacy at all. He's not trying to say, you guys should honor me. He is just pouring honor and praise on the current Lions team and acknowledging the Lions have never had a team this good, even when I played. This team is better than the one that I was on. This is so great for the city. I'm so excited. And his status has just skyrocketed. Like his past, nobody cares anymore about the awkward way he left. It's like his whole legacy has been rewritten. I think Tom Brady had something similar with the whole like deflate gate. People hardly remember now. Oh, Tom Brady's a cheater. He's a cheater. He's a cheater. He's a cheater. That was his legacy. Yeah. Instead of trying to go back and rewrite that and explain himself, he just kept winning for like years and years and years and years and years until that was totally rewritten and no one cares, right? No one cares. Like Michael Jordan's gambling. No one cares anymore, right? Because of what he did afterwards, the new stuff he did changed the old stuff that he had done. I think that's the only way.
Yeah, so we see another example of that with Kobe, where he won 3 championships with Shaq, but Shaq was the finals MVP for all of those. Shaq was the clear team captain. And even though Kobe was Mr. Clutch, who bailed them out of so many situations on that run, and he was the go-to guy at the end of games when teams were playing hack-a-Shaq, the monkey on Kobe's back was, but you put Tracy McGrady with Shaq, he's winning those championships too, right? And so then Shaq leaves, goes to Miami, and gets a championship without Kobe. Even though Shaq had Wade, it's sort of like, well, we see he got one without you, and you didn't get one without him, with him. And so it was sort of like, Kobe's got 3 championships, but he's not part of any greatest ever discussions. But when he gets those 2 without Shaq, people retroactively reinterpret history, and then they give him credits for the 3 that he got with Shaq. And when they talk about Kobe, they say he won 5 championships, but they never said that until he proved that he could get those 2 without Shaq. And I agree with you that if you have some aspect of your past or the way your story is narrated, if you resist that, it kind of creates a Streisand effect. It just makes people more aware of it, but it also does something powerful and regrettable to how people see you. You know, it's kind of like, imagine a person who talks and the first thing you think is, wow, they're really smart. But then they start talking about how smart they are. You lose it immediately. Or someone who is really beautiful, but then they start talking about how beautiful they are. Even if they are beautiful, you don't even want to give that to them, right? Like it almost starts to look ugly on them. And anytime we boast of our own greatness and how much we should have been appreciated, my jersey should be retired, you got to let other people do that for you. You know, I don't care who you are, you got to let other people do that for you. You look at Luka right now, the whole city of Dallas is like asking for refunds. They're crying. They're so sad. He would work against that if he joined them in the same way. He's playing it very intelligently, right? Like, I'm surprised. I didn't expect that. I thought I'd be a Maverick for life, but I'm just happy to be a Laker now, and I'm going to focus on basketball. We know how he feels, right? We know he feels like, man, they shaded me. That wasn't. But you can't say that. Let the people fight for you. Move on. And like, go seal your legacy in this new place. And that's so important for people thinking about their past. Like, how do I recontextualize my past in light of creating a better future? And the interesting thing about it to me is that's the story of every saint.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's the story of sainthood. Yeah.
Every pen stroke forward into the new part of your story literally rewrites a pen stroke from the part that was already written. Like that, it's just like there is a connection there. It goes, this is a concept that I hear Jonathan Petito talk about a lot, in a lot of different ways, which I really like. The way that redemption works, of like Christ reaching in, going down into the lowest parts, going out to the fringes, and then coming back up, and that like it permeates everything. And so when you redeem your future or your next step forward, you do something good moving in the forward direction, it simultaneously reaches backward and it pulls part of your past with it. And it turns that thing that was a stain on your legacy into something that wasn't. And like, that is a very real force. Now, do you think it works in the other way too, though? Like, let's take Kanye West. Is he destroying his legacy by being crazy in the present? You like that transition? You didn't think I was going to go there.
Got him. Got him. He's difficult for me because you and I have different feelings about Ye. I still think he's a very relevant, successful force, and I'm not sure how his story ends. As far as legacy, though, so legacy is a different word than power or influence or success, right? Legacy is about how you are remembered and what you are remembered for. The way in which things seem to be going is that his legacy is tarnished, right? He's said enough. He's pretty much said just about everything you can say to get canceled and to make people not want to publicly vouch for him or associate with him. The most that people will associate with him on now is sympathetically, compassionately saying, someone needs to get this guy some help, right? But that's it. That's as far as people are willing to go. And so it looks like that, but I've seen so much craziness, not just in my lifetime, but in the past decade, in terms of this rewriting of history, that you never know what the next generation is going to say that's in disagreement with this current generation. So, for example, if you go around asking anybody today, let's say under 25, was Kwame Brown a bust? They'll say no.
Because of his YouTube channel.
Yeah, and you go on YouTube and you Google Kwame Brown, you will either see podcasts and shorts of him talking, or you will see highlight clips that show brilliant moments by him and a whole bunch of talk in the comments about like nobody really gave this guy the chance that he deserved, right? Like, and you'll see clips of like Kobe talking positively, like, yeah, Kobe knew. But when you and I were living at that time where he was drafted number one with the expectations, you couldn't have told anybody at that time that he wasn't a bust, because that was the narrative. The expectation versus what was happening on the court were not a match. There was never a debate about that. But the next generation comes along and says, well, we see that differently. We interpret that differently. And so it's very plausible in my mind that when you and I are long gone, some things that our generation would never do could happen. The next generation could be like, yo, we want the Cosby Show back on TV. That could happen, right? The next generation could say, hey, we think that you all were scared to make the distinction between good art, good comedy, and political correctness. We're not scared to laugh in the way that you guys are. We want this back on the air. We want this person back. So you never know. Like, that's why I think trying to be on the right side of history is a fool's game. And you got to focus more on obeying your conscience and following the truth and being prepared for the fact that some future generation may come and look at what you do, even if you died a martyr, and they say, this is a total fool who wasted his time.
It's so hard, as if you're a person who has a high sense of justice and fairness and truthiness, to know that people in the future are going to be completely off base in the way that they perceive certain things, and certain narratives are going to be completely wrong. And there's nothing I can do about it. You see this. I mean, we talked about the NBA and their narrative problems last time, but you see this with this all the time, where like these people will be like, oh, the 90s, everybody that played in the 90s was a plumber. You know, they were all these like losers. They had no athleticism. And I'm like, no. And there are literally accounts who all they do all day is rage against that and just be like, no, let me show you Dominique Wilkins. Let me show you. And they're like, don't let the narrative go wrong. And it's kind of a losing battle. It'll go where it goes. I mean, maybe that has a contribution. I actually saw with the Luka trade, this is funny. You know, he gets traded, and of course, it's the most insane trade ever. It makes no sense. It was a terrible decision from Dallas, almost any way you slice it. But people will still try to be like, well, okay, maybe Dallas had a reason. Luka's gained a lot of weight, and he doesn't play very good defense. And both of those are like factually true. It doesn't change at all that this was a terrible trade. But the fact that in this sort of narrative-based world, everything gets bundled together where it's like, if there's any justification or anything that goes on this side of the ledger, then that's a threat to somebody whose narrative is on this side of the ledger. So they have to pretend that none of those things are true.
Right.
And so the people who are saying this is a crazy trade, I started to see them tweeting these little highlight clips that would have like 10 plays selected over the last 5 years where like Luka stole the ball from someone and would be like, can't play defense, huh? Explain this. And I'm like, but he's not very good at defense. That's just known. But you don't have to pretend that that is untrue in order to say that this, but because that's the way these narrative battle, whoever wins that, whatever record is kept in the digital world and whatever future generations think, they'll come up with some narrative of their own that may be divorced from both of those. I don't know, but there's no way to do anything about that. It's, you have to like, just let it die. You know, you have to just let it die.
Yeah. I think if you try to control that, you're being very presumptuous because you don't even know how these things are going to end. So what kind of future are you even betting on? But yeah, you know, like you said, that's just not how things work. You don't get any control over that. It's a trap. I mean, if somebody wants to tell me that they honestly believe that John Stockton would struggle in today's NBA, that they can name 6 point guards in today's NBA that's better than John Stockton. Hey, okay. All right. You know what I mean? Like, okay.
That's a little part of me dies just saying okay to that.
You know, but it all comes around too, because like some people get mad at this when they talk about the Jordan versus LeBron debate and how, you know, some people on the pro Jordan side will say, oh, this is just a marketing debate and LeBron is their guy. But in 10 years, it'll be whoever is the star then being compared to Jordan, whatever. It's like, well, maybe that'll be true. Maybe they'll compare that guy to LeBron. I don't know how they do it, but give it 15 years and there will be people who will come along and they'll look at the highlights and they'll look at LeBron and they'll say, he was okay. He's not as good as this guy, though. It's the cycle, man. It's the cycle.
Well, I can say that now about like 20 guys that are in the NBA currently that are better than LeBron. So that's an easy one. Come on, you just set me up.
Hey, but let's go back to Ye because this.
Yeah. You got to tell me you have this infinite capacity to see something other than a dude that's just lost the plot, gone crazy, and is now he's irrelevant. He's only relevant as a joke at this point. That's how I see it. But you're like, you seem to feel like he's up to some genius scheme or something.
Well, I don't think he's irrelevant. I do think he is a genius. I'm not so sure that he's going to win at whatever he's trying to do.
How would you define it though? Like, what would winning look like at this point?
I think Ye is trying to prove that he is powerful enough to defy the institutions that are necessary for everyone else's success and still get what he wants in terms of money, power, and cultural influence. I think Ye is so for most people, let's think about it in terms of political warfare. Political warfare, we could say there are 4 ways to defeat a man. And I say political warfare because I'm not talking about the spiritual or moral dimension. But the first way is you can say to silence him, right? Take away all the platforms through which that person can broadcast their voice, right? We saw this happen with Trump when he got ousted off social media. I think some of those folks are trying to pretend like they didn't really want to do that. But, you know, you say, we don't like this guy, take the microphone out of his hand, shut him down, close his accounts. And so there was like a 2-year period where even though Trump was going on his website and writing updates every day, people were like, what's Trump doing? Like, nobody knows where he is, right? Because he was being silent, so to speak. And there are degrees of that. The second is you can say stigmatization. You make it really risky or unprofitable for people to publicly associate with a person, right? And so this can be, you know, you create rumors about them or you threaten them. The third, it gets more sinister from here, is you actually kill them, like literal physical assassination. The fourth is you criminalize them. And generally this takes the form of accusing them of assault. In the 2 ways that tend to work, right? You can't really do it at the level of Will Smith punching Chris Rock. That can affect somebody, but he'll overcome that. But there are other forms that are just like, oh man, nobody wants to work with this guy or put this guy in jail, or they're just done, right? Those first 2 ways, silencing and stigmatizing, have happened to Ye in a way that I don't know if I've seen anything like it in my lifetime. And when I say it happened to Ye, I don't mean it conspiratorially, like it's just like generally accepted fact of the industry. And I don't mean it in the sense that it's something that he didn't invite. But when you look at the industry, this guy pretty much gave his middle finger to the industry. When he wrote his infamous tweet and then doubled down on it, and all of these large sponsors, all of these companies dropped their partnerships with him, and his net worth dropped in half, the guy doubled down and was like, it's me against the world. I'm still going to say what I want to say, right? And for the first time, it's like, okay, Ye, now you're making music, now you're making fashion, now you're designing and doing all those things you used to do, but the industry is such that nobody's promoting you, nobody wants to work with you. You even saw when he made the rounds on a podcast in the immediate aftermath of that. Like, I think he went on LeBron's Barbershop podcast. He did. They recorded the episode. They never released it. They apologized for even doing it. Same thing with Drink Champs. He went on Drink Champs, did an episode. I'm sure you can find the episode now, but they issued an apology pretty quickly because word got around really fast. Don't put that dude on your show in a positive light. And so the only kind of interview you saw with Ye in the aftermath of that was an interview where people were pretty much using it as an opportunity to showcase themselves to the public as disagreeing with Ye. Like,
did the memo go around, don't put him on your podcast in a positive light? Or did they sit down with him and he start saying things that literally, forget about offending the industry and whatever, offend pretty much everybody, that offend all of his fans, that offend all of the listeners of the shows? Like, he's tweeting out stuff these days like, I'm a Nazi, I love Hitler. Like, is it a joke? Is it whatever? Like, you think of what will irritate literally everyone, what will offend or tell literally everyone that I'm either crazy or a bad person. And to not think that, you have to come up with some really complex justification. So it's not just like, if he was just saying bad stuff about the industry and getting blackballed, it'd be like, in this current era, in this current culture, that'd be a brilliant strategy. Most people are too afraid to do it because they'll lose all their close friends, but their fans will actually love them for it these days. But he's just saying stuff that like offends everyone and makes no sense. So like, to me, it feels like a different category than, let's say, Trump or Elon Musk kind of taking this turn, this direction of, throwing all the legacy media under the bus and all the like mainstream everything, ripping on it. You can do that now and have a huge win with your audience. I don't feel like he's doing anything anymore. Like, he's just saying crazy stuff just to, I don't know what, like he truly wants to have everyone hate him or what? Like, I don't get it. It seems to be beyond, hey, I've cut ties with the industry now, I'm on my own.
Yeah. So first I want to say I'm not painting him as a victim, right? I'm not saying that there's a cause and effect relationship between what he says and how people respond. And
But do you think he's strategically trying to get himself canceled?
My theory is that he is at a point where he has a me against the world attitude. I'm my own man. I do what I want to do. I say what I want to say. And he has a very strong sense of you're not going to control me. Sometimes you see this in kids and you see it in some adults, but by the time we're adults, most of us don't really have the power to like act on that. Most of us don't have $1 billion net worth. Kanye has got
or we're too mature to do childish things like, I'm going to say naughty words because you can't stop me.
No, I know a whole lot of adults who lack that maturity, but they just don't have the power to get away with that. And so people do respond to fear and social norms and shame, right? Like you and I both know some people that have very little maturity, but you know, they work at restaurants or they work in retail and they need that money. And when a customer complains, they clean it up. They flip a switch and they reveal to you that they know how to act, right? They know how to act, but they clean it up because they have the proper economic or social incentives. But when you talk about somebody like Ye, you're talking about somebody who is in the upper echelon of just like financial power. I don't think the guy's unlimited. I don't think the guy's God. I don't think the guy can't be defeated or taken down, but he's got way more power and access to resources than most of us will ever know in several lifetimes, right? And so I think his attitude is strong sense of no one's going to control me. I am uncancelable and I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to make the music I want to make. I'm going to make the fashion I want to make. And I'm going to infect the culture with my energy and my spirit and get y'all to buy my stuff and nobody's going to stop me. Now, I think that's the train that he's on. And so when I talked about how word got around, don't have this guy on your podcast, I think it was both. I think on one end, he would go on podcasts and say some things and people would be like, we can't release that. But also it's, if you go on podcasts and you ask him a bunch of questions and say a bunch of things that make it seem like you're ignoring that issue. You know, so he went on, what's the one where he walked off? Tim, I forget his name. But Ye went on a podcast.
Tim Pool.
He went on his podcast and he made it clear that he didn't want to talk about that. Okay. So there was not going to be any interesting, clickable, viral moments from Ye where he's doubling down on that. He didn't want to talk about it. He wanted to talk about some other stuff. But Tim brought up that thing that he said he wasn't going to talk about a couple of times and Ye walked. And I think even in the conversations that Ye had where he wasn't talking about that, people felt a strong incentive to make sure that they aren't ignoring it and that they're distancing themselves. But anyway, that part's boring. The whole point of all of this is to say that whether you think he deserves it or not, this is a guy that the industry is not promoting. They're not promoting his albums. They're not telling you what he's doing. They're not excited about him. This guy showed up to the Grammys when he was nominated for a Grammy, but didn't even have an invite to the Grammys. Right?
Oh, he was nominated?
Yeah.
Come on, you can't be telling me he's blackballed if they're still nominating him for Grammys.
Yeah, but the guy didn't have an invite to the Grammys.
What does that mean? Did they kick him out?
I don't know. I don't know what happened. But like or
you didn't get a gift bag?
The fact that you didn't hear about his album is an example of this because Vulture was #1. His album did very well.
I heard he had a new album, but I know I have some people, including my oldest son, who are Kanye fans, and I'm like, oh, I heard he's got a new album. All of them were like, eh. I think what did it. So a lot of the people that I know who follow Kanye and have enjoyed him, whatever, when he took this radical turn and like became a Christian by all appearances and by what his thing, and then comes out with this album that's like a very Christian album. It's an incredible album. And all of his stuff was like, I'm starting Jesus Christian Academy, and like Hollywood has got all this horrible stuff and they're trying to exploit people and like speaking this very Christian message. And
unpopular view, I think that was real, but go ahead.
And I think it was real too. It totally feels real. You cannot listen to that album and tell me that is not real.
Yeah.
There's something real there. It's incredible.
Yeah.
But even as he was doing it, like he was like preemptively saying Christians don't accept me and they're rejecting me. Like before anyone had even had time to decide, like this guy who used to literally call himself God and Jesus is like, I'm a Christian now, but Christians don't accept me. And Christians are all like, wait, what just happened?
It was more like Christians were overly excited.
That was my experience. Christians were like, this is amazing. Like, how cool. And then like, he has another album that's just kind of weird. Donda. I guess it did really well. Like, and we listen to that sometimes, besides the opening song being so weird, which my kids always play in the car as a joke.
I thought Donda was a great album. That's my favorite.
Yeah, it's got like some good songs on it. But you get in the car and it's like Donda, Donda, Donda. But then he starts like, he basically just seems to go right back to a sex crazed typical, like all the Christian stuff seems to just be gone out the window. And you're like, okay, it's one thing if you're like, I've had this spiritual awakening, so now I'm doing all these weird, crazy things. And maybe I'm a little too edgy and maybe I'm a little too offensive and maybe I'm, uncouth and all these things. But then it's like, well, now he's just back to being the old Kanye, but also saying crazy stuff. So it just has this feeling like he just somehow became addicted to being offensive or just zigging when everybody wants him to zag, or like the minute he has people that like something he's doing, he has to immediately make them mad at him. And then if another group likes what he's doing, he's got to make them mad at him. Like he can't handle being liked is almost what it feels like.
Well, and that's precisely what I mean when I say I think he has a high sense of, you can't control me. I'm no one's slave. I'm my own man. He even said that like the things that he does is for the poor him, right? The poor him that always wanted to be free. And it's like, now he experiences that. I think he gets high off that. But now I will say this, I don't buy a lot of the theories about like, oh, this guy's schizo. But I do think there's spiritual warfare that's real in his life. You know what I mean? Like I think his Jesus moment was a real moment. And some people don't have room in their worldview to be drawn to Christ and then to go like in the opposite direction from that. But spiritual warfare is real, man. And it's kind of like, in stories about exorcism, who is the most in danger? It's the guy who just had an evil spirit cast out of him. Because as Jesus says in the parable, right, that spirit's going to wander around and it's going to say, I'm going to go back to the place I came from. And when it goes back, sees the man, his soul, swept out and clean and well organized, and grabs 7 more spirits that are worse than him, and they infiltrate the man. And I think that there are things that he said that indicate to me that there was a real sense of conviction working in his heart. And there was an effort, no matter how unimpressed other Christians may be by it, for him to move towards the cross. And I think there is a spiritual battle happening for him that isn't over. But at that level of power, at that level of exposure to the dark underbelly that is the entertainment industry, at that level of political warfare, I think that stuff does take a toll on a person's mind. I think it can make a person very bitter and resentful, a person very grandiose. It can fill you with pride. And I don't know if most of us can handle that level of power and wealth and maintain sanity and sobriety. So it'll be interesting to see how his story turns out. Like the reason I say he's relevant is because in spite of the explicit uniform effort to pull the plug on this guy and silence him and dismiss him as crazy, the dude keeps creating and he keeps bankrolling and he keeps doing it. Like his fashion, he's got no retail. This guy's got no outlets. He just has like a very simple whatever.
Is it still working though? Like, are people? I just don't hear him talked about like I did. Like maybe in the last 6 months, it feels like there just is this general feeling that's like, oh yeah, too bad he's lost it. I don't know, like, but maybe he still has tons of people buying his stuff.
Yeah, if you look at the numbers, it's necessarily true. And
in fact, I'm wearing all Kanye right now.
Yeah, it's like he's truly illustrating the distinction between people's willingness to publicly associate with someone and people's willingness to privately download their music and buy their products, right? So in a financial sense, in that way, he's winning. Certainly not in the social reputation associate with me sense he's winning. But I don't know how it ends for him, man. It'll be interesting. But I think you not hearing about it or people not talking about it, that's the least surprising part, because that is the power of an industry that you don't give your middle finger to in a way that the industry finds deeply offensive. Usually in the industry, you talk smack, you take the Eminem approach, say you don't care about the Grammys. There's always a label that profits from that kind of stuff. But like, for him to do what he did is similar to Drake doing what he's doing with UMG. It's like, it should not be surprising if you see UMG never promote Drake's music again.
What happened with Drake?
Not be surprising.
I don't even know.
Are you not familiar with the Drake Kendrick Lamar beef?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the beef.
So basically, after They Not Like Us, which is like the most, I think, downloaded or popular Spotify song of all time, and it's going to be at the Super Bowl. It was at the Grammys.
Dude, come on, you got to admit it's a little. You're in New Orleans, the New Orleans Super Bowl. You got to have Lil Wayne. You know what I mean? Come on now. Kendrick already did it when he was in LA. You got to get Lil Wayne in New Orleans.
And that's even a bigger issue because Lil Wayne is Drake's mentor, right? So, anyway, basically Drake responded to the success of that song, not with, what everybody thought was that this would just be a battle that just keeps going, right? Maybe Drake drops a banger, and Drake's response to They Not Like Us was like a little weak. The Heart Part 6, it sounded more whiny, like, man, how could you say that stuff about me? That's not even true. It was pretty weak response. But then Drake files a lawsuit against UMG for two things. One was promoting a song that essentially accuses him of things that have made said that he had, like someone shot at his house, that he basically has this reputation now of being certified lover boy, certified. And so he has that reputation now, and that's made his life difficult. And he accuses UMG of backing that, allowing that, promoting that. I guess defamation. I'm not sure the legalese behind it. But then the second thing is he accused them of artificially propping up the song by giving economic incentives and like inflating the numbers so that it can go up really high. And so that basically they can weaken Drake's leverage, because the conspiracy is that basically Drake was on schedule to get a massive new contract because he's just been a reliable hit maker for the past 15 years, and that UMG basically wanted to lower his stock. So that's kind of like the so think about that stuff in terms of like with what Drake's doing to UMG. It wouldn't be surprising at all, would it, if UMG's like, we're not doing anything for this guy anymore. In a similar way.
Yeah, go ahead.
In a similar way, industry wide, I think is way you having to feel like you gotta like side with him or feel sympathy for him.
What can a normal human learn from this?
Here's what you can learn from I think all of it. Number one, humility. Humility matters. No matter how successful you are, no matter how untouchable you think you are, no matter how beneath someone else, no matter how beneath you someone else appears to be, you can be replaced just like that. You know, the tables can turn just like that. Some person who looks up to you that you dismiss as a nobody, just like that, they could be in your position and you could be in their position. I think there truly is something to be said about God resisted the proud, you know, but he exalts the humble. He gives grace to the humble. And so I think it's a lesson in humility, you know, how you treat people, how you move when you're successful and when you're powerful, not taking things for granted when things are going your way. That'd be one thing I say.
Do you feel like paying attention to celebrity gossip or this crazy drama that's going on, is it like bad for the human soul, or is it like, oh no, it's potentially good or it's potentially bad? I'm just curious because
Yeah,
there's such a temptation to be like, oh, there's just so much fluff and drama and manufactured and everything's fake, or if it's not fake, it might be fake. We don't know. It's all like, here they have us talking about this meaningless stuff, and a tendency to just say, let's just throw all that away. And I don't think that that's a bad thing necessarily.
Mhm.
But I think you have always struck me, impressed on me more than almost anybody I know, probably, with this ability to not have to completely disconnect from that kind of stuff, but somehow find a way to turn it into something useful to you and valuable. So what's your take on that? Like following celebrity gossip, following the beef between Kendrick and Drake, following what Kanye is up to and all the controversy and what happened on the red carpet. Waste of time? What?
I think for the most part, if I had to pick one, I say, yeah, waste of time. You can ignore all this stuff. And it's funny because you can testify to this, because I probably don't sound like it when I talk about these celebrity things. Me knowing about this stuff is like me knowing about the NBA. I probably haven't watched the NBA game in like 2 years. And I know who got traded live. And I'm not even spending a lot of time reading about it, listening to commentary about it. In fact, I'll often send you a message and be like, hey, I heard somebody say the Warriors got Jimmy Butler. Give me the rundown on how that's going to affect their season. I don't know why the Warriors are playing the way they're playing right now. Like, I just would love to have an excuse to turn the TV on and watch them again. And I'm not about to do it now.
Super easy in that case. Just 2 words, Steve Kerr. That's it.
But yeah, you know, I find some of this stuff interesting. I hear about stuff. I enjoy philosophizing about it with my friends, but I don't think you need to keep up on any of this stuff. And I think this leads to maybe the more important lesson. St. Alphonsus Liguori has an excellent essay on spiritual reading. And he talks about the importance of pious reading things written by the saints or things that are about the saints versus worldly reading. And he says that even when certain forms of worldly reading are innocent, they don't invite you to do anything that's sinful, they still carry forward the spirit of the author. And they often orient us towards the world. They inflame worldly appetites and worldly ambitions, you know? So like you read, it's all good. Like there's some improvements we all need to make in those areas. But when you read things by the saints or about the saints, it inflames your sense of holy ambition. And it makes you long for things that aren't temporal. And so I think if you lose yourself in stuff like trying to debate if Kanye is winning or not, trying to see what side you're going to take of the Kendrick and Drake beef, it's like, first of all, these guys are fighting over things that from an eternal perspective don't matter, right? And you focus on this stuff so much, you can develop a vast vocabulary for being dissatisfied with your life and for prioritizing things that are going to pass away with everything else that doesn't matter. And I think if you had the opportunity to choose between reading about the lives of the saints versus keeping up on Kendrick and Drake, I'm staking my side on the saints all day. And I don't care what they say in the YouTube comments.
So two different thoughts on that. This is really interesting. One, when you said like reading the saints, it just gives you this different feeling, and that is 100% true. And I think you can also reverse engineer that, right? So if you say, hey, here are the saints, Go read them and you will feel this way. And you do, and you have this feeling that's very unique. It's very different than just reading a newspaper or even like just a typical novel or something, or a nonfiction book. Then I think that probably also is true, because no church, Catholic, Orthodox, Protestants don't really have saints, but claims that the only saints in existence are the people who have been sainted and added in an official capacity.
Right.
So I always wonder, like, I think that it's probably also true that if I am reading something and it makes me feel that same way, that person also has a saintly quality to them. Like, I feel the same way when I read C.S. Lewis, who is not a saint in any church, as I do when I read some of the saints. Yep. And there's like a similar quality to it. And so I feel like it works both ways. It's also a way of identifying quality writers, thinkers. There are some people who are still living today, and you can't be a saint while you're still living and in any official capacity. When you read their writing, it's like, that's different. It hits me different. It brings me something. It brings me to a better place. It makes me feel more holy. So I think that's a good thing to remember, because sometimes I can feel like, okay, so you got to go read the lives of the saints or whatever. And it's like, well, sometimes that can be really hard to connect with. If it's like, hey, this person was an aristocrat in Russia and they had, in like 1400 and this thing happened and this, whatever. It can give you that feeling, but sometimes it's like, okay, I guess I got to go read that instead of something that maybe connects to me more directly. Do you know what I'm saying? But there are things that connect more directly that do have that same feeling to them, that do have that same. I was just reading a new translation of the letters of Paul, and I'm like, oh, this gives me that same feeling. It's different than like a traditional Bible translation, but it still is more elevated. Feels like it's making me more holy than just like a typical thing. So I think that's an interesting thing to ponder in reverse. Like, if you're looking for hidden saints, look for things that, or even in music, there's sometimes music that can produce that, or other forms of art that can make you feel like surely there is something holy in this,
But by the way, really quickly, in fairness to St. Alphonsus Liguori, he says pious works. I'm the one who's saying books that are by and about the saints, but he says pious works.
The saint was right, and you just failed to live up to it. I was tracking with St. Alphonsus Liguori. I think I said his name.
I can't misrepresent the great doctor, the great doctor of the church.
The second thing, this is something that I used to think this way, but I haven't in so long, that it was really refreshing to hear. I think as I've gotten older and I have kids who are teenagers, and it's like the stuff that they and their friends want to watch or do, whatever, it's like, it all just seems like fluff and crap. It all just seems like nonsense. And you get on Twitter and it's all nonsense. And I'm like, I want more of that feeling that I'm getting when I'm reading the saints, when I'm reading the Bible, these things we're talking about. And it can be easy to overplay the role of the sacred or the holy, in a sense that there is such a thing as the common that is okay and even necessary. Like, some things in life are just common. And I was listening to a Lord of Spirits podcast recently. It was about like ritual purity. And at the very, very end of it, Father Stephen D. Young was talking about this. He was like, the whole concept, like, some things are holier than others. Some rituals and days and songs and things are holier than others. There is this kind of hierarchy. And that means, by definition, that not every single thing you do, you're not in liturgy 24/7. You're not only reading the saints 24/7, or sometimes you're just watching a movie, and that's okay. Sometimes you're just eating a meal, and that's okay. Like, the common parts are okay, as long as they are not sinful and taking you into something dark and wrong. But that kind of reminder, and it was really funny timing, because my wife had just recently said to me, she said, I feel like I'm like we haven't hung out that much. And I said, well, we've hung out quite a bit lately, like pretty much normal. And she's like, yeah, but all you're ever doing is reading like theology stuff and like scripture stuff lately. And I'm reading, whatever other stuff, or like, I want to watch some movie, sci-fi or whatever. And you want to like watch some documentary about the church or and it was really funny to then hear right after that, like, hey, some things are just common, and that's okay. Like you have common parts of life. And thinking like there is a place you can go where you're so working so hard to sort of reject the world that you want to put yourself in your cloister, but you still have duties to the world. I have duties to my wife. I have a relationship to be maintained. And sometimes that requires almost swallowing the pride that I can have in my own, oh, now I'm reading all of these holy books by holy people. And how dare we just sit down and watch a normal movie for family movie night? Let's watch something Christian about you know what I mean? Like there's a form of, I don't know, that was like a refreshing thing for me to hear that the common things of life, take joy in them. And there's joy in those. And that's part of the created order. And that makes the holy things all the more holy as well and sets them apart in a way.
Yeah. I want to extend that thought, but then I want to come back and play Angel's Advocate with a part of it.
Okay.
The part that I want to extend is I want to say, and I believe that a thorough reading of the saints, I believe that the common things of life is precisely what makes reading the lives of the saints an important discipline. Because if we were at liturgy 24/7, I don't think we would need to read them because we'd always be in sacred spaces, reminded of sacred things. But when we read the lives of saints, especially the diverse range of them, we develop a vocabulary for showing up to the common spaces of life, spaces that we often dismiss as unholy, and getting a sense for how we can be present to everyday things. You know, like I'm reading a lot about Fatima right now, and it's like, all right, these children, man, they spent most of their days working. They spent most of their days having to deal with family obligations. Most of their days was boring. Lucia's parents and her siblings, you know, were always giving her a hard time. They really didn't have much of an opportunity to see themselves as rock stars and to have much opportunity for pride because they just took so much persecution and so much harassment. And when you see how these kids showed up in everyday life and in their work and in their time of play, it helps you step back and look at your life and get a sense of, oh, okay, like there's a different way that I can be when my wife and I are moving around in the kitchen and we're in each other's way. There's a different way that I can be when I show up to my work and sometimes my customers ain't acting the way I want them to act. There's a different way that I can be when someone irritates me and I'm tempted to blame them for the frustration that I feel, you know? So I think those two things go hand in hand. I'm with you. Like if you feel like I gotta read theology all day and I can't play this game with my kid, you know, that's going to take time away from the spiritual things. It's like, no, like good theology should show you how to redeem those spaces and how to bring the love and joy of Christ to those spaces. And also how to sometimes make the sacrifice of doing everyday things, even though you don't get that sensation of like, all right, I'm gaining miles spiritually by
I'm right. That's it. I'm writing an article, watching the Super Bowl with a beer as a sacramental act. All things being redeemed, man. TK told me.
All right, so here's the Angel's Advocate part of it. And really it's just me questioning out loud. For me, I think it's far easier to take the things of the world too casually than it is to take spiritual matters too seriously. I'm with you that you can do that. And you could get to the point where you feel like, well, if you're not reading theology or going to church, you're not being spiritual. That is a real thing. But it's kind of like when people ask me, you know, aren't you afraid of Catholics making too big of a deal about Mary? I'm like, I will be glad when that day comes. Call me up when we got more than 4 people showing up to our daily rosary groups. That's not a problem. Trust me, it isn't. It's a conceivable problem, but in actual practice, you clearly don't spend time around us because we ain't honoring her at all. We're running from the church before Mass is even over. We don't even say the Hail Mary after Mass. But it's like, in a similar way, it's like, yeah, that can be a problem. But I feel like our culture is much more inclined to underestimate the detriment that casualness and that worldly entertainments are doing to our soul. We're more likely to just tolerate things that we never let into our homes just because they're being displayed on the TV screen. And I'm much more cautious towards that tendency, although I'm not infallible in the other direction either. Your thoughts?
Well, I'm thinking out loud here. Like, I think I agree with you on the whole, and I'm trying to figure out what it was about having that reminder that was so refreshing to me in that moment. But then my thoughts started to wander a little bit too, and thinking about different experiences I've had with like priests or pastors or, you know, people that you sort of expect to be at a higher level of holiness. And I've definitely had experiences where, you know, this is really common with like missionaries, for example, or a lot of pastors as well, where you look at their family life and it's like falling apart, and their kids are having and they're like, their kids are being neglected because they're just out there in the mission field all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're like, okay, something seems out of whack. You're really holy, but yet you've got this kid that, you know, you seem to, something's missing there.
Yeah.
But I've also, it's so funny. I've had experiences in both directions. So, and maybe this is coming from a Protestant background where like, I just expect a Catholic or Orthodox priest to like be something more than the human pastors of the Protestant tradition. And so I've had experiences where I have met with priests.
You should write a book called Human Pastors, by the way.
What's that?
You should write a book called Human Pastors. It'll be like People of New York, but just pastors of earth.
Like the Protestant, it's like, no, you don't need to be more human and more normal. Like you did too much of that. You need to like be more holy and less relatable, you know?
Take those cool sneakers off and put on some nerdy shoes.
Yeah, exactly. So there have been times where, you know, you go to like a Catholic or Orthodox service, or you go to meet with a priest, let's say outside of the context of the actual service, you know, outside of the rituals they're performing. And I have had both experiences. I have had an experience where the priest walks up wearing like normal clothes and just acting like a normal dude. And I have felt an immense disappointment. Like, oh, he just puts on the costume and like does the stuff, but he just doesn't like, I don't feel like I'm in the presence of a saint. Like I want to feel like I'm in the presence where like, wow, your face has a glow. And you're like every word you say is like transformative to me. And this is clearly a holy person, right? Like I want that experience. I'm kind of disappointed, but I have also had the experience in meeting a priest like that who showed up and was very normal.
You cut off. You froze. Man.
And drinks coffee and does normal stuff like everyone else. And I've had the experience of that being, I don't want to say a relief, but like a mark in their favor in my head. And I'm trying to ask myself what the difference is, why there are some cases. I mean, I remember one of the first times I ever went to like a Catholic service and the guys are walking around in robes and he like walks up the steps. One of the priests walks up the steps and I could see like white sneakers underneath the robe. And it immediately like brought everything down a notch for me. Right. I was like, oh, well, this just feels all very like, so you're just a dude wearing normal clothes under there. Like I thought, I don't know what I expected, but it like shattered the whole thing, you know? But I've had the opposite as well. I met with this Orthodox priest for coffee and him talking about how his wife doesn't really like coming to all the services. She only comes to a few, and he would be like in the church all the time if he could. And something about that, and he seemed it was like very relatable. And something about that actually like deepened my sense of his holiness. And I'm trying to decide like what is the difference? Why sometimes I think I froze up. I don't know if you heard me, but the question was, why sometimes seeing the sort of common side of a holy person, sometimes that has a positive effect on me and elevates them in my mind. And sometimes it feels disappointing and it lowers them. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I don't have an answer.
Yeah. I mean, I can speculate and, sometimes it just depends on what we need, right? It's like, take the people out of it and think about going into a sacred space. There are times where you can go into a space that's very traditional, icons, candles, bells, and all that kind of stuff. And it can be just what you need. It like takes you out of the world and elevates your sense of transcendence. But then there can be other times where it's like, you don't want that, right? You want something that feels more earthy and now, or you want to, talk to a person who you feel like you can go play basketball with, or you want to read about somebody who feels like they lived in your lifetime. Because sometimes you can look at people, whether it be a saint or whether it be a pastor or a priest, and you can think to yourself like, man, I wonder what they would do if they came to my job and had to work with me. I wonder if they could survive a day. Or I would just love to see what they act like when this person I have to deal with, pushes their buttons in this way. And sometimes it's not even a matter of like not having faith or respecting them. Sometimes it's a genuine desire to see how would they handle it? Because I know how to act in these spaces. I want to know how to act in those spaces. And so sometimes it can vary with what you need. But there's this quote I love from Father Gregory Pine. He's a host of a podcast, Godsplaining. But he says, holiness is a secret between you and God. And one of the things I like about that, I think it has many layers, but one of the things I like about that is there's a certain aspect of our journey towards sanctification that involves you being honest with yourself about what you can't get away with, even though you can probably make a fantastic logical argument for why there's nothing wrong with it. And you got to be honest with yourself about the freedoms you can enjoy, even though someone else may have some concerns about it. And that's a very difficult thing, right? Because right and wrong doesn't always come to us in the form of these explicit commandments. Sometimes it comes in the form of like, yep, all the arguments say this is innocent, but I know the way it tugs on me and I know the effect that it has on me. So I got to say no to it. And I'm not going to, externalize it into some universal rule everybody else has to follow.
Well, that's really convicting for me, because even though I can make no theoretical argument for anything wrong with it, I just know that I'm not supposed to have this conversation with you. So I think we need to end it right here.
Hey, that's the best, man, because you can't refute it. Like, Isaac, I don't know what it is. I'm sure you're a great guy, man.
God doesn't want me to have breakfast with you. I just feel convicted. No, but I think to sum up, like, this is the mystery of humility and humility and holiness, what it means in the Christian worldview to be a child of God, created for theosis, like to be just a little lower than the angels, and then in the future to judge the angels, like this elevated thing, and like what it means to be saved, to be a child of God, to be an image bearer of God, while at the same time recognizing how low and how far you are. And that tension where when it comes to a saint, I think this is the role that saints and their stories and holy people play, is simultaneously you are reminded that they are human just like you, and that they are a human who has gotten to a place that you can only dream of getting. And maintaining both of those things at once, that humility of like, I am not at that level of holiness, and I see this person, if they've been stoned and they've been martyred and they've like all these things that are like well beyond anything I have ever endured, and I don't even know if I could. And yet they're also a normal person who gets irritated when there's a dog barking at night and they're trying to sleep. And like that combination, I mean, and that's the incarnation itself. It's like God and human at the same time, like that mysterious, those two things being true at once, and just that constant maintenance of those two things, I think, is one of the core things that is crazy, but also necessary and amazing.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the greatest lessons I learned, or that gets reinforced when I study the saints, is that becoming a saint isn't about possessing all the admirable qualities as much as it is about learning to trust God with our weaknesses, right? Sainthood is found in the realization of our own nothingness apart from God. So it's like, I can be like, God, make me the kind of person that's not tempted by that anymore. Maybe the kind of person that never feels frustrated when people do that. Maybe the kind of person that never feels tired, never feels drawn to food that I shouldn't be eating. And God wants us to take the suffering that is temptation, the suffering that is our weakness, and unite it to his sufferings so that it has that redemptive value, and offering up our weaknesses to God. And the saints, like the one you described, you know, I'm trying to sleep and the dog's barking and I'm irritated. It's like that sainthood right there, right? Like trusting God with that weakness, that he still loves you and that you can offer up that frustration as prayer. You know,
you mentioned wanting help, you know, wanting to eat the right things. Are you, this is a cry for help, you still struggling with those cookie dough bites?
got a donut hitting on the table.
I'll pray for you, my brother.
That'd be the perfect spot to just cut me off right there. I'll pray for you, brother.
Yep. Pray for TK. Hey man, this was fun. I feel like we're like moving around our groove. You know, we used to have this old chemistry, this old groove. These once a month, we're kind of dialing in. We had it for a few points today. Some other points we were kind of wandering. Of course, my internet was freezing up. But what would you grade? What would you grade this conversation?
This is like Jokic and Westbrook after they play like a few games together, where it's like, hey, these guys really like each other for some reason. I don't know why they're doing this, but they just really like each other. And but it's still kind of like trying to figure out the chemistry.
you are clearly Joker, and I am clearly Westbrook in this, by the way.
No. We got to have a better one than that. Who's our?
Okay.
I don't know the NBA well enough.
I mean, I am kind of like Westbrook, as much as I hate to admit it. You know, just like all heart and hustle, no skill.
Hey, I saw Westbrook the other day. No lie.
Really?
Yeah, I was eating lunch at Air One. So I'm sitting outside eating lunch, and there's this guy who just pulls in the because it's by the street, and he just parks at a meter. It's a really nice car, but I saw him from the side as he's feeding the meter, and I'm thinking, oh, that looks like Westbrook. But you know, it's in LA, and he doesn't look that tall. You know what I mean? So yeah. I'm expecting an NBA player to be towering, and I go, oh, that looks like Westbrook. And I keep eating. And then he turns around and he starts walking in that direction. I say, we love you, Russ. And he turns around and he nods. I was like, oh, wow, cool. That was Westbrook. I guess they must have been in the I think they were in town to play the Clippers or something like that when that happened.
Dude, you should have asked him to get a sandwich with you. Come on. You got to do more than that. I
didn't want to inflame worldly ambition.
No, I was meeting with, and I'm like not like a big celebrity guy or anything. I was meeting with a venture capitalist one time in San Francisco. And as I'm waiting outside of his office, the meeting before me, the guy comes out, and it was Matthew Dellavedova, who played, for a handful of years in the league. And I was like, hey, Delly, like, hey, how's it going? Like, oh, it's great to cool. Like, hey, can I get a picture with you so I can send it to my friends? And I like get the picture. And he was fine about it, but I said, I think he was like deciding where he was like, I'm trying to decide if I want to stay in the league or go back and play in Australia. I'm looking at doing some investment stuff. And I'm like, oh yeah, well, if you were in, like, he was like a free agent at the time or something. I said, we were in San Francisco. I was like, would you ever think about signing with the Warriors? And he was like, never. And then it was like, that was it. Like, how dare you ask me that question?
Respect, man. Respect.
I was like, that's what the NBA is missing.
Yes.
He's still salty about those finals, about guarding staff, about like he had a rival,
Okay, look, I know you want to go, and I know you have to go, and I know we've lost everybody when we talk about the NBA, but this is for us anyway.
Right.
Golden State.
We're like Kanye. We're trying to alienate everybody.
Golden State has Jimmy Butler. Are they going to at least go to the conference finals now?
No.
Are they going to scare anybody in the playoffs now?
No.
Okay, why do you not see him as an upgrade on Sean Livingston, right? Mid-range game, defender, can go get you a bucket, not the best three-point shooter, but not the number one attention draw. Why do you not see that as an upgrade?
I know where the Warriors are today is utterly different than that. So they got rid of Wiggins and replaced him with Butler. Yeah, and Butler's getting paid like $60 million a year for 2 years, which is insane. Butler is a total head case who has just descended into Like he's openly whining and complaining about Miami. You know that Miami organization is a tight, well-run organization. And like a guy like that having that, well, okay, maybe not. Maybe Pat Riley's too old now, but he's left on bad terms most of the places he's been. Like my view of him, like his potential, I was like, dude, this guy is it. He's the future. And then he's just like, kind of gotten, I don't know. He's like, he's not right on the mentals. It seems like he's off team chemistry, locker room, off the court stuff. I don't know. So I don't trust him. He's very feisty and will fight with everybody. You throw that in the mix with Draymond Green, who like since punching Jordan Poole, like destroyed the Warriors' future for years. And you're bound to have some drama there. You haven't really changed anything else about the team. And what the major problem is, Steve Kerr is just a horrible, horrible coach who does the craziest rotations and like small ball at all the time, pulls out guys when they're hot, puts in horrible, like his just, that's not going to change. And Steve Kerr didn't want Jimmy Butler either, by the way. So like knowing him, he'll like not play him and then Butler will get really mad. Like, I don't know. I don't see it as Steve Kerr is such a terrible coach that only a AD, KD, Giannis, or like Joker, that caliber guy paired with Steph could win them, would absolutely win them a championship. If he got any of those guys, they would win a ring. I think they would be the best team in the league. I don't think you can stop Steph when he has somebody at that caliber next to him. Jimmy Butler is a rung below that caliber. And anything below that, the only way to win is to fire Steve Kerr. You can't change the fundamental problems on that team are Steve Kerr problems. And they're only overcomable with incredible play. And they did it for years with chemistry alone, but you start losing the bench, you start losing the pieces. Dre is older. Clay's gone now. And it's like, you can't just have Steph plus chemistry overcome how bad that coaching is. That's right. I think they have won championships in spite of the worst coaching I've ever seen in my life for years and years and years. That's how good Steph Curry is. And Jimmy Butler's not going to fix that.
Do they have any other like splash brother candidate, like reliable 3-point shooters besides Steph?
No, they got Buddy Hield. It was like, oh, he'll be great. He's been terrible. Moses Moody is good, but Steve Kerr never plays him.
What happened to Buddy? He started off really strong.
Yeah, but so then Steve Kerr stopped playing him. That always happens. He just plays Buddy Hield. He plays Podziemski, who had a great rookie year, and now he's been really bad this year. It's like,
so you blame Buddy on Steve Kerr?
He plays the opposite.
You blame Buddy on Steve Kerr?
I don't know if I blame it on Steve Kerr, but if a guy's playing bad, stop playing him. Stop starting him. Buddy's defense has been terrible. Like it's just the craziest thing. I mean, he even does this with Steph. Like as soon as Steph gets hot and it's like Warriors go on a run and they were down 10 and now they tie the game.
Yeah.
And he pulls out Steph and then they go down 10 again in like a moment where you don't have to, like, you don't have to do the rotation that way, but he's crazy. Anyway, now you got me going. Everyone, all my kids are like, why don't the Warriors fire Steve Kerr? They don't know anything about basketball. They just know that. So that's enough.
All right. So here's how we're going to conclude. You did this with me when I bored everybody with Kanye, and I have to do it with you when you bored everybody with Steve Kerr. What can we learn from this?
That is a really tough one because at the end of the day, I feel like it comes back to the feet of Steph Curry. And Michael Jordan, Kobe, you would not pull him out when he was hot if he didn't want to come out. Like the coach couldn't make him do that, right? Now they somehow they had respect with Phil Jackson. But like, and I'm convinced that if Michael, well, maybe not, that Bulls organization was weird. But if Michael would have gone, no, actually he did. That Bulls organization was really weird. But like, to me, in today's NBA, maybe those aren't good analogies because in that NBA, the era, the stars didn't have the power. In today's NBA, every other superstar and every other team, they get what they want. If they want a new coach, they get a new coach. If they want a new scheme, they get a new scheme. If they want a new player, they get a new player. Now, that hasn't always worked out. You have all these teams, trying to suck up to their stars and having no chemistry and everything's a mess and there's not really. So like to Steph's credit, he is not that guy at all. But that's also to his detriment. At what point does Steph say, enough is enough? This is not working. I want a new coach or I want a new scheme or and he just never has. He's just like, forever a Warrior, forever loyal to Steve Kerr, forever loyal to Draymond Green, forever loyal to Clay, forever loyal to ownership. Like, whatever the plan is, I'll do it. You want to pull me out? I'll sit. Now he might be mad, but like he will ultimately, he's like super loyal and laid back. And so my question is it better to take the risk of forcing something to change or just being, and I feel like it is, you got to pull that card like once or twice in your career. That would be the sweet spot. Unbelievable. Dude, it's my internet. I was just on my roll. All I wanted to say was
I'm here.
Dude, it's telling me it's trying to reconnect. I don't know if you can hear me.
I hear you.
Okay. All right. Why does it keep doing this? Okay. I'm going to try one last time.
All right.
The lesson is, I don't know. I think Curry has never pulled that card, and I'm glad he doesn't pull it multiple times a season like a lot of stars these days. I'm the star. Give me this, give me that, give me that. And it just creates chaos. But I feel like you should pull it once or twice a career. And I don't feel like he's pulled it ever. And I wish he would.
Yeah. Yeah, I've wondered that too. Is he too nice? But also I don't know. I don't know that he doesn't like being coached by Steve Kerr.
I know.
I don't know that he's not having fun. He may be getting everything that he wants.
He should have had 6 rings. 8 peat minimum. Hey man, I appreciate this. Hopefully next time my internet doesn't keep messing up on me, but you know what? Whatever. Count it all joy, right?
Count it all joy, man. You know.
All right. Peace out.
Peace.